Thank you, Charlotte. Actually, there are multiple occasions and requirements to leverage that work that the World Economic Forum has been undertaking, and we'll be happy to support it. You have, for instance, scenario planning, strategy definition, risk assessment, and actually I must say that in travel and tourism there was very, very little and I would say very limited literature on foresighting scenarios for the future. And I think it's great that the World Economic Forum again has been spending time, effort, expertise, and leveraging also the tourism ecosystem and community to define the scenario. So let's start with the first one. Next page. It's me. Okay, nice. Sorry, thanks. Yeah, so the first one, which we call the Thousand Highlands World, is obviously the least promising scenario for the sector. Why? It's about accelerated geopolitical fragmentation. We've seen already pretty recently some signs of it. Hopefully we'll be able to address them, but that's one of the key drivers of that scenario. The second one is economic stagnation. So regarding geopolitical fragmentation, one example is for instance the collapse of the WTO dispute resolution mechanism, which has been really undermined. And about economic stagnation, this scenario takes as a key assumption a 1.1% GDP annual growth, plus a potential significant decline in per capita tourism spend, especially in low-income countries. So it's about reduced international cooperation, so less multi-terrorism, stricter visa policies, including in US and EU, and we've seen that already happening. A significant drop in cross-border tourism investment as a consequence because of the fragmentation, right? This is logical. And the tourism in that scenario becomes localized, with as a direct consequence declining long-haul travel, rising travel costs, and impact, of course, on jobs, which is rather negative. There will be, obviously, some regions benefiting from it, especially cross-border regions, but obviously, overall, the sector resilience is at stake. So you have all the details again in this in the paper, which is on the table. So I'm going to provide you a 5,000 feet overview, and you can obviously look at all the details in the 25-30 pages paper, which is again at your disposal. Again, fragmentation, isolation, plus vulnerability to systemic geopolitical and economic tensions. We look at all the scenarios through four lenses. Number one, demand-supply dynamics, risk matrix, economic multipliers, and sustainability trade-offs. So for the fourth scenario, we're going to have the same approach and the same analysis. So if we look at, again, demand-supply dynamics, we have here a concentration of tourism, again, in regional border zones, which boost local economy, but which also put pressure on infrastructure and resources at local level. The consequence, there is also risk in labor shortages, demographics is linking also to lower exchanges and movement of people, reducing hospitality workforce participation, and leading to increased automation in service delivery. In terms of risk matrix, as I mentioned already, the reduced activity of the aviation sector, which is, by the way, very significant in that scenario. We're talking about 60% of fleets being stranded, which also impact connectivity, jobs, and there is also in that scenario a key impact of surveillance tourism related to visa policies as an example, data protection, There is also an impact on travelers who are data privacy conscious, which could be going and leaving the market for the reasons. In terms of economic multipliers, employment decline as a consequence of what I mentioned, again, isolation, lower economic growth. At the same time, you have also winning subsectors, such as regional rail, which will benefit from higher investment and also higher jobs. You already mentioned the cross-border shopping tourism boost. Here we have two examples, Baja California, Eastern Poland. We would see the GDP growing by 12%. There is also the impact on sustainability with trade-offs. As I mentioned, reduced global mobility through aviation and reduced emissions of aviation, but at the same time also increased emissions from road and rail travel. So that's the first scenario, which again is the least, I would say, optimistic and the most, I would say, important to take into account for any company looking at investment, looking at risk assessment and planning. The second one is the most exciting. So we're moving from one extreme to another. We call it harmonious horizons. It's a beautiful name as well. I like it. It's in that case leveraging geopolitical stability and strong economic growth. In that scenario, GDP growth on an annual basis is about 3.8%, which obviously drive global cooperation, trade liberalization, and investment, additional investment in infrastructure. The demand in that scenario surges from emerging markets, especially global south, which benefits to regions or countries such as Indonesia, as an example, Nigeria. Although we still see tension on labor with shortages persisting, and also again risk of over-tourism. But in that scenario, we have 80% of all business travelers planning for blended travel. Let's look again at the same four lenses. Again, most optimistic scenario for the sector. So for all of you who again go through the scenario planning or strategy definition exercise, that will be the high range of your numbers, while the previous one will be the low range. So in terms of demand and supply dynamics, rising income, obviously, and visa liberalization fueling increase in international tourist arrivals, about 29%, with, again, a drive from emerging markets, which is over proportionate compared to other regions. There is also supply expanding, with hotel inventory growing, but as I mentioned already, significant tension in terms of labor and productivity gaps persisting. Risk matrix, I mentioned it already, over-tourism threatens iconic sites. Just let's pick up one example, Cinque Terre. Before, the key tension in terms of occupancy, in terms of arrival, in terms of traffic was middle of July, mid-August, and now it's even starting from June and even going beyond August and even sometimes beyond September. Kyoto, as an example, has been suffering from suboptimal waste management, shortage of labor, missing retail supply for the region with over-tourism, and in that scenario, this trend is being accentuated. There is also a risk of inflating fares because of this demand surge, which is becoming really also deterring for some consumer and travel segments. In terms of economic multipliers, most promising, again, scenario for employment, growing to 430 million by 2030, with increased female representation, including, by the way, in emerging countries, and niche sectors like space tourism and regional integration driving revenue streams. Talking about female representation, by the way, I was for the third time, so it wasn't the first one, in Alula last weekend, and there were obviously overrepresentation of women, including the guide showing us the Nabatean monuments and tombs, which was for the region of Alula. So that's obviously a scenario which is enhancing that representation, which is also a positive aspect. In terms of sustainability trade-offs, renewables power 44% of travel and tourism operations. However, again, the rise in demand is generating higher emissions, mostly from aviation sector, which put at stake the sustainability of the sector. The third scenario is kind of intermediate. It's not the most optimistic one, and it's far from being the least the least one. In this scenario, we see accelerated decarbonization efforts. We also see travelers and consumers increasingly seeking low-impact travel. So that scenario, which we characterize as a scenario of rapid sustainability transitions, goes together with more and more common and more widespread adoption of sustainable practices, again, and a significant shift towards regenerative tourism, which should help Red Sea Global, hopefully. There is also a moderate economic growth, which is driven by ecotourism and green investments, also due to supply constraints and unequal access to green financing, which create new tensions and risks. In that scenario, one of the key variables is to have 68% of travelers prioritizing certified ecotourism destinations. Let's look again at the four lenses that we had also for the previous scenario. In that case, looking at demand and supply dynamics, I already mentioned the prioritization of eco-friendly choices and regeneration tourism. There is a key bottleneck in aviation, which is SAF. As probably most of you know, there are significant challenges to scale up the production of SAF to serve the aviation sector. However, rail and renewable powered island tourism are expanding to meet the low-impact travel demand. In terms of risk matrix, we see two main drivers: greenwashing, lawsuit surge, for instance, class actions multiplying versus false claims in terms of destination claiming that they are regenerative or they are certified. And there is also stranded assets and biofuel-driven deforestation posing major risk. In terms of multipliers, again, higher than the first scenario, lower than the second one. Green tourism driving including growth with 18 million green jobs globally for the sector and a significant boost to rural GDP through local sourcing. There are also increased sustainable investments with pretty high returns. One example is the returns for ecologists, which could be which could have a ROI up to 28%, and green carbon market revenues. Trade-offs: ecotourism hotspots facing degradation, unregulated activities impacting biodiversity, and certification fatigue, also triggering what we would call green rebellion among budget travelers. I will complete the review of the scenario with one that we call tech turbulence. And you probably understood that we were trying to discriminate those scenarios, but there could be a combination, obviously, of those different drivers, right? There could be hybrid scenario, but for the sake of simplicity, and also to really understand how high could one or how low could one scenario drive the sector, we really wanted to differentiate the different scenarios. So in that scenario, we're talking about accelerated tech disruption. Example, much higher penetration and much faster penetration of AI in travel and tourism operations. So here in that scenario we took into account a 78% growth by 2030 of AI penetration in the sector, with disparity though in terms of regions being benefiting from that growth. As an example, Africa benefiting it at a lower pace and to a lesser extent compared to Asia. There is also growth becoming uneven as the automation reshapes the workforce, and also intensification of market concentration, which we will see also on the next page. Our four lenses, so demand and supply dynamics. In that scenario, luxury and virtual tourism grow. So when we talk about virtual tourism, we could talk about, for instance, tourism through the metaverse as an example. We could also talk about growing AI-created travel experience, augmented reality, virtual reality, again through metaverse as an example, that would really become overriding in the demand-supply dynamics. At the same time, there are also key risks in that scenario, with data breaks causing risk of in terms of cybersecurity. So with an impact which is estimated in that specific scenario up to $450 billion globally. Again, affecting SMEs because they have probably most vulnerable and weak data protection. There is also a risk of AI-driven deepfakes, so websites, platforms, destinations using AI fake generated reviews as an example. In terms of economic multipliers, we obviously have a strong push related to tech. So tech-driven job distribution reshapes the workforce, with 25 to 45% of tourism roles being automated, which also create both risk and upskilling opportunities. Here, venture capital flows into digital tourism, reaching $47 billion annually, with traditional hospitality valuations declining, which is also a very important point to take into account in case of scenario planning. Sustainability trade-offs, I mentioned it already, virtual tourism cuts physical travel emissions by 18%, but also impact the use of digital energy, and we saw it with Katie in the previous presentation, with the respective impact of different energy requirements. The AI-driven aviation efficiency saves fuel. However, there are rebound effects on luxury travel which offset or end result gains. Again, differentiated scenarios. I think very important to take into account for your scenario planning and strategic definition exercise. You probably also saw a few risks here, which you may have not taken into consideration in risk planning and mitigation. And that would be very interesting now to discuss and see how do you relate to them, and how would you take them into consideration, how relevant you find them. Maybe Charlotte, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, I think we'll now open to the conversation. The idea is really to be able to all speak together around those scenarios and see how you already have maybe foreseen some of this in your current industry, and if you already seen like some of these like trends and driver who are already like yes, okay, yes. So do you, how would you or the entity you represent relate to the present scenarios of travel and tourism, and which one like maybe resonates the most based on your own experience?
Who would like to start?
think the fourth one with the strategies about the risk associated to geopolitical uncertainties and economic fluctuations. I was just a bit of a story. I was in Aqaba for the past 6 months, so in Jordan, and we were very affected by the war that is next door in Israel and Palestine. So I was there, and we faced an issue. It was no international travelers were coming to the country anymore. So we're like, what can we do and how can we suppress this? So we've seen a growth of local tourism, and we kept high revenue and great ADR by shifting our communication, marketing, and target audience through different travelers. We've also tried to partner with everything that was available in the city, the other tourism actor, in order to bring tourism and new tourism to the hotel. And I think this is something that everyone should also focus on, not having only one area to look at, but always try to look further and how can we diversify our audience and bring different tourism.
Yeah, I think it's in the report. I think we identified that it took the example of Israel actually. That's like the suffered 81.5% decline of tourism. I didn't think it would go that far, that Jordan as well. But I think it's something that we should integrate. And when you say that and I think it's interesting because we always focus on international tourists rather than like understanding, and there is actually no available data on domestic tourists worldwide. Like it's really difficult to capture the number of domestic tourists. And we'll be very interested to learn if like this collaboration, because that's also what we are trying to look at the World Economic Forum, is how public-private collaboration, how innovative models can like scale new practices that benefits to all and also to the local communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that I also participated to the FHS summit in Dubai last year, and I attended a session with the Minister of Economy of UAE, where he mentioned, so he didn't refer to wars, but he referred to pandemics, including the COVID in 2020, where he said that there is also a great push of UAE to, I would not say shift, because I think the international tourism is still important, but kind of really enhance local and domestic tourism. One example is the development of the wellness offering and promises to dedicated areas. One example being between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. But that's, I think, typically also one of the strategies, which is not too far to what you mentioned in terms of diversifying both the demand and the supply. Right? So yeah, great example. For others, how do you relate to the scenario? Is there one which makes more sense to you as an individual or maybe as an organization?
Yes, I have an observation. First of all, thank you so much for these 4 scenarios, and they really look very realistic, and you kind of give us something to think about. So I live in the United States, in Texas, and as you know, with all the changes that have been taking place in the U.S. with visa restrictions, with the tariffs, the one that resonates most closely right now is, I guess, scenario 1, which I hope will be short-lived, because obviously there's all, people want to travel, but if there are restrictions placed for travel, there's a disincentive. So right now, I think that's the one that I'm seeing and feeling more personally. I'm a professor at the university. We're seeing that with even international students that are, disincentivized into coming for programs. And we had a very good partnership with Canada, and because of this nationalism theme, the Canadians are up in arms and saying, we don't want to buy American. Even changed, I think, the Americano coffee to Canadiano coffee or something, right? I mean, it's just all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So that first scenario, the present moment, definitely resonates, most closely with me, and I don't know how everybody else sees that from their perspective.
I believe that's one trait of this scenario is like the fact that there is like regionalization of tourism, and in the region here, I think there are strategies as well to club various countries to have like a kind of like a visa strategy, a joint visa strategy over different countries that will help to increase the length of travel. To ensure that tourists are staying longer in the region, and also making sure that it benefits to several destinations, and you're not like overcrowding one specific location.
Hi, it's John Spears, NSQ. Thank you for condensing into 4 succinct, great pillars. For me, it's a combination of all 4. And what you sort of see is one compensating for the other. So you have fragmentation, and then that tips into harmonious societies. And then you have increased tech tipping into green ascent. So you actually have cause and effect. You actually have these elements competing and complementing and correlating all with each other. So for me, it's all 4, right? But it ends up in a better place because, hey, naturally you gravitate to one side as a counterpoint to the other. I still think that, we heard today that 1.9 billion travellers in 2019, 2.9 billion in 2030. So the ascent of the traveller will always be there, irrespective, I think, of all of this. It would just shift, and it would just gravitate to places that people feel are, I guess, are natural places of respite against counterpoise with the global tension that you create or you present out there. That's just the point of view.
I think we try to focus and to exacerbate each element to showcase what will be the outcome, and to exaggerate the outcome as well of like each
dimension.
Yeah, each dimension. Any industries that have been facing challenges related to the tech disturbance, and especially emergence of artificial intelligence in your operations, or like benefits out of it?
Well, I think one thing, the gentleman who just left was just talking to me. If you talk about AI right now, not a disturbance, but as well something which can add value, which as we have started to look into and to work with waste management and waste reduction tools on an AI perspective. So there are a couple of food waste management systems right now out there which have camera systems to directly identify of what kind of food you are throwing away, and then to give you directly benefit and information of where do you waste our food, for example. And then of course, it's not only from a waste perspective, but as well where you can actually save money in the production process, for example. We are as well looking right now into automation of certain systems, even in the waste management perspective. At the Red Sea, for example, we are currently working with technology directly built into waste bins to tell us, okay, so when the waste bin is actually full, when it needs to be collected, to start reducing as well any kind of trips and have any kind of negative impact again. So I believe that technology can help us drastically, and AI can help us as well in the travel industry. But as was as well part of the scenario, it can be as well a negative, it can have as well a negative impact at the end.
absolutely. Any other example of AI acceleration or enhancement in the front office side as well?
I mean, I just wanted maybe to highlight something else related to this, is that nowadays we become more and more as well dependent on technology. And I think one event happened in Portugal and Spain a couple of weeks ago where technology stopped completely when the electricity shut down. And we saw that the whole world was like collapsing. And I think that when we speak about front office and guests, we see a lot of guests that are also now looking into traveling to get away of this technology and computer and all of this. So I believe we also need to be careful into how much we integrate technology, especially in guest-facing activities. Just another example, nowadays so many airplane companies don't do the normal check-in where you put your luggage, like they ask you to do it yourself, right? Some people like it, some other may not. Personally, I'm not a fan, but I believe it depends on everyone. And we see that there is also a lot of new properties. I'll just also give another example. We've opened a property in Alula, Dartantora, which is focusing on reducing, I mean, we almost have no electricity there, right? Everything is candlelit, etc. And we have a lot of travelers that are also seeking these kind of experiences. So I think AI is a great tool, and technology is a great tool, but I believe that it really depends where we use it and how we use it, and we need to target properly the audience we want to face with it.
There is a tremendous challenge in the, I would say, in the region, but also specifically in the kingdom. With you're talking about check-in as an example in hospitality. With we're talking about 50,000 keys at Neom, 47,000 keys at Royal Medina. I don't know. You probably know the number for Alula, which I don't know. Cake. I mean, I could mention tens of projects, and where obviously there will be this trade-off that you describe, but that could be to a certain extent the key to successful operations and efficient operations as well.
So I have a question. In your tech turbulence, do you have a statistic here that says while virtual tourism reduces physical travel emissions by 18%, digital carbon footprint surges, etc. So, and I remember when video conferencing first came out and people said it's going to be the death of travel and people don't want to travel and things like that. Do you really see virtual travel increasing? I mean, we're a human business and it seems like people will always want to travel. I'm not sure to what extent virtual travel will actually increase. I'm not even sure if it's actually happening right now. I don't know. I have not seen it. So I just wasn't sure how that statistic kind of came about.
So the statistic is of course exaggerated due to the scenarios, but you already see that there is a shift in virtual tourism in the fact that, for example, for entertainment, a lot of like concerts, events are now also projecting their own events through digital platform, and you see this, for example, with the Coachella in the United States. So it doesn't mean that it's really changed the basic audience, but it just like multiplied the potentiality of the audience as well.
The one comment I would make to also showcase the shift in terms of trends. It's not exactly about virtual tourism, but I think it's a sign that there are generations which probably some of us are part of, which originally were traveling based on tourist guides, right? Lonely Planets or whatever. And now, I just read a statistic that in some European countries, I mean, example France, 1/3 of potential tourists, of people, you and I, are just using Instagram content or TikTok content to decide about their destination, to make sure that they can tick the box on what to visit, and so on and so forth. TikTok. I think the 33% is only related to TikTok, by the way, even excluding Instagram. So it's not exactly about virtual tourism, it's a bit different, but I mean it also shows the acceleration of the trend here.
I'm Jake, Transformational Travel Council. I mean, all four scenarios can play out depending on the context, different variables in different places. And I understand this is sort of that global purview. But looking at what you asked us to reflect on up there, I see this discussion kind of coming from a top-down approach when I think it's much more of a bottom-up or an inside-out. When we talk about regeneration and that positive, becoming a positive, it's about adaptability and resilience, and that starts within the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at, you've got foster collaboration, cooperation in ecosystems, I think that's where it needs to be, the focus should be, because that's where we can actually take action and create the change that I think that we want to have, or at least be prepared for the unknown or the uncertainty as each scenario plays out. But unless we're understanding regeneration from a leadership perspective and introducing it to our cultures and looking at it through the lens of how can a community become regenerative, then we're missing the opportunity to be as adaptable and resilient, regardless of what the scenario might be.
Makes sense, yes. Want to add something?
No, I think it's very true, and we did not present it here, but in the approach that we are trying to develop is really to put this host community and the traveler at the same level. And so when you don't look the sector through the lens of the traveler journey, but when you look it from the lens of like the host and the travelers together, it changes the entire ecosystem perspective and how like governance and cooperation mechanism and what kind of resilience we can have at local level. And that's also shown that, of course, there is not one for all fit approach. But we could not present it in this one, but in our next paper it will be more around that approach as well. Any final thoughts or comments? Yeah.
Hi, this is Sidon from Gronfus. Actually, back to the AI and automation point. For us, for example, let's take energy efficiency, for example, when we are dealing with consultants in the very early stage when it comes to the hospitality. So I think that implementation of this sustainable design, I would say, yes, it is there in place, but the only challenge that we can see from, let's say, energy optimization perspective is that there is a gap between what is there or what is already purchased and let's say the operation itself. So people tend to operate equipments, let's say, the way that they used to do like 30 years ago, 20 years ago. So yes, the AI is there, the automation is there, but at the end, you will not gain the benefit of it when it comes to this gap between what is there, implemented in the design, and if the operators does not have the knowledge or the, let's say, facility management does not have the knowledge to get the best use of this equipment, I think it's only wasting of money, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very important.
Hi, I'm Hassaf from British Global. Actually, I have a question that I'm just curious to understand from other people who work in hospitality. Personally, I started to, when I travel, to look for like boutique hotels, like not the big brands.
Mm-hmm.
And because I feel it's more, give me more like the experience that I want to take when I go back and the memories that I want to share. So how like the big hospitality, in the big brands in the hospitality sector are thinking about that, are investing on small boutiques, or how the shift they will make for the new people who would, who then like for the people like me who want to think about that.
Who want to answer?
I think she wants to mention like the shift in the segment from the normal generation to Gen Z and afterwards.
Mm.
They are looking for more sustainable practices.
Boutique hotels which you find on TikTok, right?
I'll answer that one since I'm in that space. Been in the boutique business now for about 15 years and starting essentially boutique brand here now in Saudi Arabia as well, where we're opening our first property next year. And it's very correct what you're saying. The challenge that we tend to find is that every time when I build up a boutique brand, a few years down the road, I get forced to either sell, to exit in some way or another against the big boys. And they take over our brands, and sadly enough, within 3 years, I can't even recognize my own brand anymore. So it's a complex situation. What I see fortunate is that when I look at the general growth statistics of boutique experiences, we are seeing a constant upscale in terms of its demand. When I look at the big brands on a global level, yes, they are expanding, but in terms of their expansion compared to experiential, very, very customer-centric driven, and I can mention any big brand, whether it's a Ritz-Carlton, whether it's a Sofitel, whatsoever. I'm always a number there, and I will always be irrespective of how much I pay per night. When you're in a boutique hotel, you are a person. You are addressed by name, and just to me, that is an experience which is so intricately different that makes you, get recognized for who you are. You can get customized experiences and so forth. And I see generally that is what the world trend is going to get to. I don't think the big brands have realized it yet, and they are constantly trying to purchase every time these smaller brands. That's why you see all the big boys suddenly have 50 to 100 brands now. But I don't think they have succeeded yet. The good thing is I see a future where the big brands will naturally die off, and
Glenn, what do you think? That's a fifth scenario. It's a fifth scenario.
Where everything is based on sensibilities. The world cannot continue the way we are. We're talking all about forget sustainability. Let's talk about regeneration. And it's the same thing has to happen in hospitality, and I do see it happen. Hospitality regenerates as well. The corporate world disappears, and those regenerative, focus-driven practices in the end will stand out. It's just an evolution, like everything in life. That's the way I see it, and I'm positive because it's a great future, that I see coming ahead for us.
So Glenn, you will be out of business very soon.
That's the reality, right?
So you will be out of business very soon, Glenn. So
I should have left the room about 10 minutes ago, clearly.
Still there is the backpack travelers. They have the highest percentage. And I don't think that they prefer boutique hotels or a big brand. They would love to stay in hostels with one bed and
they will want that social interaction.
Yeah, so this is, the whole ecosystem of the beauty of tourism industry. So you can see all kind, let's say, of different customers and classes.
But I think it's a point where we want to really emphasize is like hospitality goes beyond just the hospitality, but really it's all about like the connection and when like 80% of the sector is SMEs, I think it's indeed kind of like timely to rethink the relationship between big corporation and the SMEs who are actually the forefront of like the connection between the residents and the travelers, and that will make the sector actually resilient and thriving.
It's the SMEs that always work with the local communities.
Yeah.
We support local farming where we have the opportunities, all of that. We bring their produce, so we actually naturally have a much smaller footprint. We are not those global corporations that are looking at anything which is the cheapest buck from wherever it comes in the world. And you always got to ask how much they're actually contributing to the local community. Most of them are very, very minimal. So you might find that a 30 to a 50 key boutique offering actually benefits the community tenfold more than when you have a big corporate entity coming in.
But maybe that's what we should measure more than like
and
how many spends per travelers in a country.
It would be fantastic statistics to actually demonstrate that by focusing on that more narrow band, you benefit the community, the environment, the whole socio-economic model far greater than what may be perceived as, oh, I'm introducing 200 jobs versus 50 jobs. No, 50 jobs versus in the hospitality product itself, but then all the suppliers tend to be more local, so you find that you actually created hundreds more comparative to that. Would be nice to kind of start looking at that as the next scenario.
But in the other briefing paper, which is going to be released soon, there is also a key trend which everybody knows, but the question is how do you implement it, about personalization, right? I'm not here to defend the big brands, but just a couple of examples. I've been going to Fairmont in Riyadh, so a core group, for 1.5 years every week. Yesterday I arrived, 5 people called me by my first name. Well, they added Mr. just to be polite. So I think and it's a training, right? It's not that they remember my name, of course. So I guess there is also lots of attention and effort put on personalization and customization and making sure that you don't become that number that you mentioned. But it's a risk, obviously, it's a risk. Yeah.
I went in the hospitality business because I was so sick and tired of it. So I said, no, I want to do this change.
I think we need to wrap up. No? Yeah, we need to wrap up.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Maybe, depending on your question.
Well, I just wanted to lean into what you just mentioned around personalization. I do see that the ability to go more personal, and it's not necessarily through your typical questionnaire or even a relationship building strategy. It's just asking better questions. It's getting deeper into who that person is, what are their motivations, what are they seeking, what is their why. And that's something that I think AI, when channeled properly, allows the corporate space, the larger corporate hotel chains to continue to stay relevant in that space because they're able to capture that data with good questions. That then they're able to build that relationship with that persona through an AI channel and able to meet the same sort of needs.
I think we have one more slides from Katie saying that we should wrap up.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the conversation. We would love to continue to work with you all within our stream on shaping the future of travel and tourism. So if you want to share your insights, case studies, whatever you would like to contribute, we would be very happy to continue the exchange and to engage with you in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.